Hi everyone, thank you for being here today. I'm going to start off the webinar by introducing our speaker. Martin Schneider is the founder and CEO of RemNote, a popular spaced repetition and learning tool with over 1 million users. His passion for effective learning strategies began during his time at MIT, where he struggled with retaining information for classes and exams. This personal experience led him to dive deep into learning science, particularly focusing on techniques like active recall, spaced repetition, and effective note-taking. For the past 7 years, Martin has been using and teaching spaced repetition methods for effective learning. His mission is to help students worldwide achieve their learning goals by providing them with powerful, science-backed learning techniques and tools. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree from MIT. Thank you, Martin, for being here, and you can take the floor.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much, Marco and Jobin, for having me. So today I'm excited to talk about a topic that I think is pretty important, which is how you can get higher grades while spending less time studying and doing better in your career as a result. So let me get the screen share going here. Are you guys able to see these slides? Marco, yeah, okay, thanks. Great. So, yep, today we're going to talk about how you can remember what you learn, not only for your university classes and for the MCAT, but for beyond throughout your entire life by maximizing your understanding and mastery and minimizing your study time. So we're going to start off with some brief background and theory on learning science of how you can learn effectively and what the psychology and cognitive science communities have found. And then we're going to do an interactive walkthrough through this spaced repetition learning tool called RemNote that we're building. In general, we're going to try to keep it on the shorter side and very practical so that you can immediately go and start learning with these effective learning methods after. So starting with the problem, you often, when I talk to students, I find that they feel that there's almost something wrong with them, where they feel that only they are the ones who are forgetting what they're learning or struggling unnaturally in their classes and wondering how everyone else can remember what they're learning. And this just isn't true. Forgetting actually is sort of the natural process that happens whenever you encounter some new piece of information. And the unfortunate truth is just to remember anything, you need to practice it at a properly spaced out schedule, which we'll talk about in a moment. And the second part of the problem is that to get those high grades that you want, especially for massive exams like the MCAT or for your step one and beyond once you're actually in med school, you need to be able to remember, retain, and apply vast amounts of knowledge. This also then is true if your careers down the line. When I'm talking to my doctor, I really want them to know the actual deep technical details that they had learned decades ago at this point. So long-term memory is really important for thinking and in general for being a successful clinician. And especially if you're studying for years, if you're about to start med school, it's really worth learning how to do it effectively to get higher results and grades in less study time. So maybe if we can see with the chat here, if you think about your class that you took only a year ago at this point, on a scale of 1 to 5, if people want to put in the chat, how much of that do you remember? Not sure if I can find the chat. Okay, maybe we can go back to that after. But normally when I survey people on this, they'll often do numbers which are lower than 5, which is unfortunate, especially if it's a class that you're putting a lot of effort and time into. And let me just make sure that you guys can still see the screen. Okay, thanks. So psychologists have done a lot of studies and tried to figure out what's going on here. And they found very consistently that without practice, retention drops very quickly. And if you plot this with sort of the retention interval for a given piece of information on the x-axis here, and the corresponding grade you would get in a given class on the y-axis, you can see that only a few months or after a year of not studying a given topic, even if you got an A or an A plus in a class, often your retention drops all the way down to where it'd be a C level or below. So even initially remembering something successfully is not enough for total long-term mastery. Stepping back briefly, my background, I was a computer science student at MIT, and as I was studying, I often found that I wasn't exactly getting the results that I wanted. Even if I was doing okay in a class, I would often start to just forget all the information that I learned the following semester, and it started feeling just a huge waste of time, which motivated me to try to figure out how you can actually learn things for the long term and have your knowledge compound on each other. Since then, I've been using spaced repetition for 7 years. I've made 45,000 spaced repetition cards with 300,000 practice interactions, also competed at the USA Memory Championship. So in general, I'm a little bit obsessed with spaced repetition and effective learning strategies. The study process that I'm going to describe today is mostly broken down into 3 steps. One where you can go to and do your initial learning. Normally, this is going to lectures or watching a video online or doing some extra reading, etc., where you're getting your initial exposure to some piece of knowledge. However, this is almost never enough to actually fully either not only understand the idea, but also to commit it to long-term memory. Then is where the real meat and most of the effort begins, where you're really trying to build mastery, mostly by doing deliberate practice and active recall, which we'll talk about in a moment, which can either take the form of writing notes, making flashcards for your notes, and then studying daily with spaced repetition. And then finally, when it comes to exam time, you want to be fully ready to apply your knowledge through practice exam questions and then some final spaced repetition flashcard practice. But in general, learning something is not a one-time event. Sometimes you can do this by cramming it all, where the initial learning is the day before the exam, and then you're trying to quickly build mastery and then get to the exam tomorrow. But that, as you guys know, won't always lead to long-term mastery. So for first, to set the ground here, there are a few different kinds of memory which are useful to think about. We have long-term memory, which I've been mentioning, which is sort of a long-lasting storage with a large capacity. You guys know tens of thousands of words, first of all, and then hundreds of thousands of facts, depending on how you count them. And then also your short-term memory, which is way more constrained, has a brief retention and only a limited capacity of 7 plus or minus 2 items. And of course, there are overlapping brain regions for all these, and it's not a totally strict distinction, but I do think it is a very useful model where when you're learning, you're trying to arrange some idea in your short-term memory so you can understand it. And then most of your effort should be making sure that your initial understanding is great, and then you can bring it to long-term memory. Our goal here is to get you to the point where you can have automaticity, where whenever you encounter some given idea on the MCAT, for example, when you see a particular code for an amino acid, you want to be able to automatically, instantly bring back the connected knowledge you have about that idea so that you can go and quickly answer that question or further down the line, solve some important problem. Automaticity is basically just the ability to do things without occupying the mind with your low-level details. So when you're trying to remember the code for an amino acid, you don't want to have to spend a bunch of time carefully going through and saying, no, it's not this one, it's not this one. You need to immediately come to mind so you can really focus on the harder part of the problem. And for the MCAT, this kind of thing comes up quite a lot. Here, your need is to be able to quickly pull something from long-term memory back into your short-term or your working memory so you can apply it. And your goal when learning here is first to understand it and then move your knowledge as efficiently as you can from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. To do so, the most efficient way to do this is via active learning as opposed to passive learning. Passive learning are things like listening to a lecture, maybe like we're doing right now, rereading, highlighting, and in general, just letting the words flow through you. It's much more relaxing and it often feels like it's effective. But as you guys all know, often you're not actually getting that much away from it. Active learning, on the other hand, is really going and trying to put your mind to work, doing practice problems, taking notes, making flashcards, practicing flashcards, that kind of thing. It's the same as if you were working out at the gym. You need to be using your muscles, in this case, in your mind, to really go through and put in the work there. Active recall is a really important form of how you can do this active practice, where by just going through the process of seeing some idea, in this case, this flashcard, which is asking me about what Gilbert syndrome is, you need to go through and actively bring the entire connected idea to mind for you. So for me, I started having ideas come to mind about how Gilbert syndrome can lead to jaundice when you have a buildup of bilirubin in your blood and it's due to low amount of UGT. And all these connected ideas, you want them to fully come to mind here. And we'll talk more about how to do that in a moment. But really letting yourself sit and do a proper active recall practice is often painful, but necessary to fully understand an idea. When you're doing active recall, you want to, again, bring your knowledge from short-term to long-term memory. And this basically tells your brain that knowledge is important. When you're doing this active recall, the idea is that you're basically strengthening the neural connections, where one of the core foundational principles of neuroscience is that when you have neurons that fire together in a given pattern, then they will then wire together so that they, in the future, will fire on that same pattern more successfully. So if you get them to fire along this given pattern while you're doing your active recall practice, either through flashcards or an exam, when it comes to a practice exam, when it comes to your real exam date, then they'll fire in the same pattern and help you recall that piece of information. You can also get benefits at the sort of metacognitive level here. For example, if I was doing that Gilbert syndrome flashcard and I noticed that I was confused about something, then I could go and either look that up, maybe I'm actually confusing it with another idea, or maybe I just didn't understand some detail of it, then you can go through and try to fix it. And it also just helps you to learn how to recognize knowledge in a wider set of context. Once we actually have done our initial active recall practice, though, that doesn't mean that we're going to remember that piece of knowledge forever. As mentioned, forgetting is the default. And even if I was able to successfully recall what Gilbert syndrome in this case was with 100% accuracy right now, with perfect retention, over time, that's going to immediately start to decay. When you initially learn something, that rate of decay is pretty steep. It's an exponential which drops off quickly. It, of course, depends on the difficulty level or your personal difficulty level of a given piece of information, but it will follow this exponential curve where after maybe a few days or a few weeks, it'll often be at near zero or below 20%, that kind of thing. So then the question is, how do we effectively fight this forgetting curve? How can we make sure that you're maintaining something so that it's ready on your given exam date or later on? And there, fortunately, the brain has this amazing ability to bring things deeper and deeper into your long-term memory, where things no longer decay at that initial rate, but you can get them to decay slower and slower, where you can then start to memorize and understand vast amounts of ideas. Here, the somewhat surprising piece of information there's two core things to know here. So first, as you continue to practice something, that rate of decay will decrease. So here in this sort of rough mock-up, you can see that this exponential rate of decay is pretty fast here. And then over time, rather than taking only a few days to learn something, to forget something, it'll start taking a week to forget it, and then it'll be stable in your memory for months. And if you keep on practicing it, it'll be stable in your memory potentially for years. And fortunately, to achieve this effect, you don't need to be practicing the same piece of information every single week or even every single month. Here, one of the maybe very surprising things that cognitive scientists have found is that if you practice something when it gets to, say, 85% probability of recalling it, then it'll both not only bump it up to that 100%, but it will get it to start to decay slower. So as a result of being able to wait until that 85% or so, then you can also space out the intervals at which you practice something exponentially. So here you can start by having to practice it after only a single day of learning, but then you can wait 2 days, and then you can wait maybe let's call it 4 days, and then 8 days, and 16 and 32, and these can expand exponentially. Of course, the exact pattern here or the exact intervals depends on how hard a given piece of knowledge is, and also how effective you've encoded it in your memory. But this overall pattern of exponential decay and exponential intervals is one of the most replicated results in cognitive science. For some brief background here, the research here started in the 1800s with Ebbinghaus, where he was basically trying to figure out what these curves looked like, and he was testing himself on these random short word lists, where he would go and try to memorize these random word lists, and then he would evaluate himself at different exponentially, or at just different points in time in the future. And that's when there was this first observation of these exponential decay curves. I think it's just sort of interesting that no one had realized this before then, and then someone actually had that first measurement of that. Since then, there's been tons and tons of different replications on this. And there's this one particular paper, which I think has a great literature review, where they really go through and find that this is a very universal phenomenon, both when you try to analyze this across different fields of study, from physics to medicine, biology, literature, whatever. This both is true at the individual level of the low-level piece of knowledge, as well as the higher level of sort of what effective grade you would get after some given amount of time. So then the question is, how do you actually put this in practice? If you need to exponentially space out the intervals between different times of practicing a flashcard, how can you do that? Early systems here were physical. One called the Lintner system, where it had you put the flashcards, physical flashcards, into specific boxes. So you would start with everything in box 1. If you correctly answered it, you then move it to box 2. And then if you answered that again, you move it to box 3. And box 1, you would do daily. Box 2, you would do every other 2 days. Box 3, you would only do once a week, let's say. And through this, you can get these exponential intervals just by putting things in these boxes here. Of course, we don't really want to have to do all that manual work ourselves. So nowadays, there are automated space repetition tools, which will automatically figure out for each individual flashcard how well you've remembered it and what the next interval should be for when you should practice it next. These tools will give you a queue of cards to practice each day, They will let you grade yourself so you can tell the tool if you remembered it or not, or how well you remembered it. And then they will show you the interval for when you need to practice it next, as well as automatically bring the card back on that given day. Uh, Today, I'm mostly going to be talking about RemNote, which is a tool that we're building, used by over 1 million students. Anki is also super popular. Honestly, use either of them. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is that you're using spaced repetition, active recall, and not wasting your time tricking yourself with ineffective learning strategies like just endlessly rereading things like I used to do. Diving a little bit more into the spaced repetition model, because I think this is pretty important to understand. So if we look at the y-axis here, we are plotting the retention, which is the probability of being able to successfully retrieve a piece of knowledge on a given day. We call that retention sometimes, or retrievability. We can think of them as synonyms for right now. And over time, your retention will always be decreasing. But then we can look at the slope of the curve here, and we're going to call that the stability. So when the slope is very steep here, when it's decaying quickly, we say that the knowledge has low stability and is quickly decaying in your long-term memory. But as you keep on practicing it, then that stability will increase and will stay in your memory for longer and longer. And these are the two parameters which the actual spaced repetition algorithm in RemNote and Anki is modeling. So for every single card behind the scenes, there is some number representing that given card's retrievability, the probability you'll retrieve it if you practice it today, as well as that stability. Some algorithms also try to model the difficulty of a given card. If you keep on getting a particular piece of knowledge wrong, keep forgetting it, then the algorithm will take that into account and use that to model out what your next interval should be for that given card. Who uses spaced repetition? Well, first of all, basically all med students. Many of you might have already started to use it to prepare for the MCAT, and basically everyone uses it to prepare for step one. For both these exams, just a vast amount of knowledge that you need to know and commit to long-term memory. Jeopardy winners also use it, and people serious about learning from basically all domains put themselves through the struggle of using spaced repetition because it's just sort of what you have to do if you're serious about committing things to long-term memory. And I would just want to emphasize here that there's often this framing, which I personally find kind of weird about how often memory is just about committing things through rote memorization, or flashcards will lead to some shallow understanding where you're just trying to memorize exact words of flashcard and not really getting deep understanding. I think that is honestly sort of backwards, where if you're using spaced repetition properly and simply just trying to really understand each flashcard when you're going through that active recall, then that is how you build that deep mastery over time. Because whenever you learn some new piece of information, then it will be built upon what you know before that. So as mentioned, there are two main spaced repetition tools which you can choose from. The first is called Anki. It's a great tool. It's what I used to use as well. And it will basically make a big database of all your flashcards in a table here. And you can put in the pieces of knowledge, and it will automatically schedule out when each of them are due. That said, one of the issues we're trying to solve with this kind of classical spaced repetition tool, such as Anki, is the encoding side of things. And how you encode a piece of knowledge, or how you sort of get that understanding of an idea, is one of the most important parts of the learning process. To properly understand an idea, you need to connect it to your related ideas. You need to sort of let yourself poke at the idea and try to break it down into smaller parts and figure out if it's something that you actually really think that you can understand because it's built upon a foundation of other ideas that you know, or if you are falling into that trap of just sort of memorizing the words. And to try to help you get to better encodings, we built RemNote, which is sort of Anki, meaning flashcards, combined with a note-taking tool such as Notion or Google Docs. So the notes are basically the same as Notion, and the flashcards and spaced repetition are the same as Anki, and you can put them all together. So as I'll show you in a moment, you can make your flashcards directly in your notes. It'll also let you schedule out specific exam dates, let you upload PDFs, and it's sort of an all-in-one study tool used by 1 million students. Hopefully this doesn't sound like an ad pitch or something. We're going to give you guys free access anyway, and most of it's free. Really, our goal here is just to help make more spaced repetition users in the world. And now I'm going to jump to a live demo of RemNote there. So let me switch the screen share. If anyone has any quick questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer that too. But otherwise, I think the live demo would be most helpful here. So just switching the screen share. And okay, great. Are people able to see this now? Okay, great. Thanks, Marco. Cool. So RemNote looks like a normal note-taking tool, except that everything is organized out with bullets. And to write your notes, you can basically, of course, just put them into bullets here, but you can also make flashcards in your notes. So let's say that we're in some lecture talking about the cell. We start hearing about what the mitochondria is. Here, we can just write down a question for ourselves, such as, what is the mitochondria? And then I can create a flashcard just by typing the equal sign once and then twice. And you can see that it immediately turns into a special arrow like this, as well as in this case, it's automatically suggesting what the answer could be. I can also just type the answer for myself, or I can press tab to accept this answer here. This is sort of the first step of learning that we're trying to guide you through as well, by having you pay really active attention to whatever the lecturer is saying and identify the key pieces of knowledge that you're trying to remember. If you're in a lecture on a cell, then you really want to start to identify the mitochondria, of course, as a really important part of the cell, and you want to figure out how you yourself want to think of it. Often I honestly prefer to write out the answers myself as well as part of that really critical encoding process where I can start to think about how I want to think about it. For me, honestly, just something like the center of energy production. And just by trying to think about it in my own words, I'm helping myself stay focused and build out that initial encoding. Then because I type that equal equals here, this is a flashcard. If we want to preview that here, we can see that it will test me on the front of the card and then let me do that active recall process and bring that answer to mind. If we want to go and let me just call this a biology lecture here. After the lecture, we can then go and practice all these cards. So if I click on this up here, then we can see it's testing me in this flashcard again. I can go through that active recall process. And after I press show answer, then it will reveal the answer as well as some extra explanation if I need that as well. At the bottom is where the core space repetition part of this happens, where now it's my job to decide how well I understood this piece of information and inform the tool of when I want to practice it next. In this case, I think I know what the mitochondria is pretty well, so I'll tell the tool that it was easy to recall. Then RemNote will automatically schedule out the next intervals, a next date on which I need to practice this specific flashcard. Or if there were many flashcards in this given document, it'll individually schedule out all those individual cards. So you can see here that the next practice interval will be in 6 days on September 11th, and then 15 days after that, 1 month after that, and the interval will just keep on expanding exponentially. Of course, a normal document will have many different cards in it. So you can, for example, what are ribosomes, and so on. As long as you just type the double equals to make a flashcard, then you're giving yourself that initial good encoding step, as well as making flashcards for yourself after. One thing I want to mention is that I often talk to people who sort of panic when they're trying to practice the flashcard here, especially right after lecture. You really shouldn't expect yourself to remember every single piece of information. And when you're using a tool like this, you can sort of learn over time to trust that the algorithm is taking care of you. You can think of it as taking all this data from how people will remember or forget a given piece of knowledge. And as long as you sit on a given flashcard and really just try to let your mind bring the answer to the front of things for 10 or 20 seconds, then there's a good chance that if you're staying on top of your schedule, it will come to mind. And even if it doesn't, you're putting in those reps as if you were working out to help to entrench that idea in your mind here. This one of the reasons, again, that people often find this a little bit painful is because the tool will try to wait until there's an 85% chance or so of you remembering a given piece of knowledge before it shows it to you. That's just to try to minimize the total amount of time you need to spend studying. Let's say if you waited till 95%, then you're going to spend tons of time just endlessly practicing the same flashcard over and over. But yeah, I just want to say that it'll be a little bit painful, but that, of course, is just how you get any kind of personal growth. So that's how you make flashcards within a given document here. What if you're trying to go through an entire biology class, or how do you organize your notes more broadly? So I have this sort of little demo set up on the sidebar here, where you can see that we have a folder for all my classes. And then within that, we have a folder for each of the classes we're taking, and then just a document for each given lecture. So here you can see some example notes for a biochemistry lecture, where we have, oh, got cut off. But we have headers for each section, such as bonds, and then we're learning about the periodic table, we're learning about electrons, etc. Where as you go through the lecture, whenever you hear some new important topic, you can just make a new header for that, and then start putting your flashcards underneath there. Of course, it doesn't entirely matter how your notes look. In some cases, it can be helpful to structure things out here, again, so you can structure them out in your head. The important thing is how their ideas are represented in your head so that you can go and apply them when it comes to exam day. Then the tool will take all these different flashcards across all your different folders and documents and figure out which flashcards you need to practice on a given day. And if you click on flashcards on the left here, then you can see that today I have 9 different flashcards too across my different documents here, just in this demo account. And if you wanted to, then below you can go down to specific different classes, or in this case, different lectures, and focus your practice on those specific ones. And that honestly is the core, those 2 ideas, making flashcards your notes and organizing them with documents and folders, are really the core of what you need to start using spaced repetition. And if there's one thing that I want you to commit to from paying attention today, is to just go download Anki or go download RemNote after this and just try it out and spend some time trying to figure it out. You're going to need to do it in med school anyway, and it's also super useful for the MCAT and honestly just super useful for life. That said, there's a lot of other things on top of this which make spaced repetition even easier. So I'm going to talk about those a bit as well. So in RemNote, we try to help you prepare for specific exam dates as well. So for example, if my biology exam is coming up in a few weeks, it's helpful to be able to tell the tool when my specific exam date is so that it can optimize my practice for that given day. To do so in RemNote, you can go to your folder here, and then from this dropdown, you can set an exam date. And here I'll just say it's for this entire folder, and my exam date is, let's say it's on the 20th. And here we can see a visualization of how much it will have me practice on each given day. And the exam scheduler tries to keep your total practice burden, meaning the number of cards you need to practice each day, to a roughly constant amount. So you can dedicate to a given amount of, let's say, 10, 20, whatever, how many minutes of practice you need per day to remember all these flashcards for your given exam date. If this is something like exam for a class, it might only be 10 to 20 minutes. If this is something like the MCAT, it's going to be hours and much more than that, or especially for step 1. And then you can just go ahead and confirm the exam schedule here. And then that's all you need to do. It's basically active. And as long as you go to your flashcards each day and jump into the practice queue here, then it will have figured out all the cards you need to do to prepare for this given exam, or to keep all the cards mastered throughout your different documents. Let's talk a little bit more then about what the overall workflow looks like here. So what I did personally and what I normally recommend and see working well for people is to sit down and lecture and begin taking notes during the lecture itself. So go ahead, make a new folder for your biology 101 class. And then for each lecture, just go and make a new document for lecture 1, lecture 2, etc. And then here, when you're in lecture, you really want to take notes, but you really don't want them to be verbatim notes. That's probably the most common trap I see people falling into, of just desperately trying to track every single thing the lecturer is saying and just focusing on typing. Instead, what you really want to do is focus on identifying, again, those key ideas and especially the key terms and piece of knowledge that you want to take away for a given piece of, for a given subject. So if we're in some biology lecture here, and if we're talking about the cell, then maybe the lecturer says the word mitochondria, and maybe I'm vaguely aware that this is a specific organelle that's important, so I can just write down the word mitochondria here. Then I can start to quickly take notes about the mitochondria by using indentation in my bullet notes here. So I can make a new bullet underneath by pressing first the Enter key. That just adds another bullet, as you can see here. Then I can indent it underneath mitochondria by pressing the Tab key. Now I can quickly take any notes that I have on mitochondria. And if it's an idea that I sort of immediately understand, then I can directly put it into flashcard form. So for example, I can write down what is the purpose of the mitochondria. And then again, I can just type the double equal sign to make a flashcard and let the AI write the back of the answer for me, or write it yourself. I could say, what is the location? of the mitochondria. And again, I can just keep on writing flashcards in this way. And you don't need your notes to be perfect. As you saw right there, I just made a typo. I wouldn't worry or focus about that during the lecture itself. Again, just only focus on understanding the key ideas and sort of organizing them in your head. After the lecture, you can then go back to these notes and do another pass through them. It's really useful to be able to check if you really understand what we were talking about. Do you really know what ATP is? Did you really get what the cytoplasm is? And if not, then the best time to resolve that is right after the lecture, where it's still somewhat fresh in your mind. Another way that you can save time during the lecture is just by writing shorter or more terse notes. For example, I didn't really need to write mitochondria here, again, because it's already indented under the bullet mitochondria. If we look at this flashcard here, we can see that it includes all the different bullets which we are indented under. For example, it's indented under the mitochondria bullet here. And if I wanted to, I could have simply said, what is the purpose? And the flashcard would still make sense because it would still show mitochondria. Or I could have just removed it entirely and simply wrote purpose, did the double equal sign to make a flashcard, press tab for the AI to write it, and then I've quickly captured that idea, letting you stay focused on the lecture and really just trying to continually think about if you're really understanding what the lecture is talking about and if you're how you want to encode it in your own head for later on. And let's see. So then the other important part of successfully encoding an idea during lecture is to try to connect it to other ideas. So for example, if I heard this term ATP here, if I didn't know what ATP is, then that's another key term where I want to go and make another flashcard for it. So here I would probably just write down ATP as its own bullet, and then maybe I would just make a flashcard for that directly by typing the double equal sign. Then I can tab complete it. In this case, it'll just say adenosine triphosphate. Maybe I want to, what is this in general, or like what is the purpose of adenosine triphosphate? I probably find it more important to understand that than just to remember the full name. So if I make a flashcard for that, then I can remember that its purpose is for the energy currency of the cell. Then maybe I want to remember what its chemical structure is. And in general, just try to go through and figure out every piece of information that you want to learn here and break it down into really atomic flashcards. Breaking the knowledge down into really small flashcards is sort of useful for two reasons. One is that it helps you to understand that idea in your own head, but then it also helps the spaced repetition scheduling tool to separately schedule every piece of knowledge. So every single bullet here will have its own spaced repetition schedule. And even if you successfully remember the purpose of the of ATP every time you're practicing it, then that will start to get a very long interval, which is great because you're not spending much time on it. But maybe if you're forgetting the structure of ATP, then if you press forgot in the queue here, then that will start to have a shorter interval. So by breaking flashcards down into smaller pieces of information, the tool can separately schedule them all out so that you can save more time studying overall. This is how you sort of go through and create flashcards manually. And again, as long as you're not taking verbatim notes, this is what I would recommend doing, honestly, to help you stay engaged in lecture. But sometimes you have either a lot of knowledge you want to get through, or maybe you prefer to not take notes in lecture. In that case, you can also use more AI to help you generate notes from your PDFs or your files here. So Joe Bennett sent me over some PDFs here, which you could imagine you got from some lecture, which we just wanted to use as an example. So I already went ahead and uploaded these to my account here, which you can always just do from create and then upload. And then from the PDF viewer right in the tool, you can do a few different things. So first, as you're reading through the PDF, you can again try to really leverage active learning by identifying key terms. So if I open up the, let me delete these just to show you how to make these in a second. But let's say we started with this blank editor here. So as I'm reading through the PDF, I can again try to identify key terms. And here, maybe there's this new term called the tiger domain, which I want to understand. So here I can just go and highlight the term tiger domain, and then I can either highlight it just to make a highlight for myself, or I can immediately go and make a flashcard on it here. So I'll just go and click on this flashcard for the tiger domain, and I will add it to my notes over here automatically for me. So there's sort of different levels of how active you can be in your study process here. And then it's sort of up to you to find the ideal level, which is always a trade-off of spending more time to understand something, which will generally lead to better understanding and better retention. If you want to keep on reading through the entire PDF, then you can do that and either take notes yourself or break it down into specific flashcards. And then whenever you highlight something, you'll also get these links here, which you can use then to jump back to that corresponding place in the PDF. If you don't want to go and make all those flashcards yourself, you can also use a tool which helps make flashcards for you. RemNote does this. Honestly, there's a bunch of these tools that'll help you do this now as well, which I think is a pretty good way to study too. So here, if we click on Learn Tools at the top in RemNote, then I can go and generate flashcards for this entire document. And then I'll just go and select all of these here. This is just going through each of the different slides. I can select which slides I want to generate cards from or not. And then if I press continue here, it'll automatically start writing flashcards for all of the different slides for me. And then if I go and save these, then it will just go ahead and add those all to my notes. And I immediately have a bunch of flashcards on this, which I can then go practice with spaced repetition in the same way that I showed you before. Now, I'd say that this is a very powerful tool, but one that you definitely want to be careful of and go about in the right way. For example, here, when I'm going through this flashcard, in this case, if I hadn't previously attended a lecture on what the different types of electron microscopes are, then these will probably just be arbitrary letters to me. If they're not connected to some real idea, it's of course not going to be an effective learning experience. So in this case, either make sure that you've actually read through the PDF itself first, or at least attended a lecture on something. And if you come across a flashcard that you don't understand, then you can either use this explanation right below to try to understand it better, or you can click on these key terms here in RemNote to try to understand each of them in detail. Or these days, AI is a super useful tool as well if you're trying to understand things, as you guys all know. So often I'll just go and ask questions about the given flashcard here. And remember, you can do that sort of right next to the flashcard here. This sort of thing, I'm sure you guys all know. I'm just reiterating it because it's very often I see myself and others falling into the trap of being lazy or just not having enough time. And it always feels good in the moment, but I always regret it later. But anyway, that's bulk generating flashcards like that is a super useful tool. Generating quizzes is also very useful. So I can go and do this for the PDF here, and it will make a bunch of multiple choice questions that I can go and test myself on. Normally, I'd recommend that you want to go and use flashcards first to build your core body of knowledge and put that into your long-term memory. And then you can use these quiz questions to check your understanding is correct, check that things are correctly connected to other ideas in your memory, and especially before an exam to help go and make sure that everything is top of mind. And if you go through these here, I didn't read the questions, so I'll just guess randomly. It'll give you an explanation on why you got it right or wrong. And again, there are plenty of tools you can use for either of these. We just try to make it easy here. Yeah, and then going back as maybe a sort of final point to the notes, I wanted to just talk about the different kind of flashcards that you can make. So if we jump back to our biology lecture here, and so far, I've made all these flashcards in the form of single line question and answer. This is probably the default, which you should use for most of your flashcards, but there are also a few other kinds which are useful for different kinds of information. If, for example, we have a single sentence, such as the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, I can make a flashcard directly from this sentence just by selecting the part of the sentence that I want to test myself on, in this case, the mitochondria. And then I can press this fill in the blank button here to make a fill in the blank card. If we look at the preview, we can see that it will test me on the specific part of the card that I had selected. So we call this fill in the blank card, or in Anki, you'll see this called a close with a Z card, but they're basically the same thing. So especially for quotes, that's pretty useful. Or if you have a bunch of pre-existing notes, sometimes I see students just bulk pasting their notes into a tool like RemNote here, and then just going through and selecting the piece of knowledge that they want to remember and test themselves on. That often is pretty effective. Another kind of flashcard here is multi-line. So multi-line are powerful, but again, you want to be careful with them. So for example, if I wanted to remember what are the four chambers, or maybe let's say the four valves of the heart, instead of putting them all on one line here, I can go and type the double equal sign not only twice, but after I type it twice to make this arrow pointing to the right here, if I press enter, it'll go and make a new line below where I can then make multiple different lines for my answer. So in this case, the AI is autofilling this for me, so I'll just accept that. And you can see that it will test me on all four pieces of these knowledge together here. So this kind of thing is often somewhat hard to remember because you'll often go through and practice it in different orders in your mind. And as we talked about before, one of the core underlying principles here is that you sort of want to let your neurons, or lack of a better way of phrasing it, fire in the same way each time. So for these multi-line cards, I'd often recommend choosing a specific order to go through them and or choosing an acronym. The specific acronym that I use for this piece of knowledge is try pulling my aorta. So I would reorganize them like this here. So I always read through them in this order here. And then I would maybe write my mnemonic at the bottom, which again, the one just I use is try pulling my aorta, which again is just sort of gibberish that I use to remember these four things here. And again, to make a multi-line card, you can just do some card, then with the double equal sign and just press enter to move it down here. If you want, you can also actually test yourself in order on these. So right now with the multi-line card by default, all these will appear at once. You can tell the tool which ones you remember or not, but they'll all appear simultaneously here. If you wanted to actually test yourself one by one, I can click on the arrow here. It changes from a multi-line card to a list card. So then it will go through and test me first on the tricuspid valve, on the pulmonary valve, and so on. It'll test me through these one by one, and it will let me grade each of them individually as well. So that's sort of multi-line cards and then the list variant of that. Then you can also make image occlusion cards. So for example, if I wanted to remember where the four valves in the heart are, often I'll just grab that piece of text and then just go Google it to grab an image here. Hopefully you guys can still see this other tab. I think you should be able to. Then I'll just get this other image, pop that into RemNote just by pasting it here. And then I can make an image occlusion card by on the image. If I just click this little icon here, I can just drag a box over the different piece of text that I want to remember, or I could just click on the top right here to let the AI do it for me. And then this will just generate a bunch of flashcards, which will test me on each of those boxes one by one, if that makes sense. And then the final card I wanted to show here were table cards. So if you have a lot of different pieces of knowledge of the same format, it's often useful to organize them in a table. So here I'll go through and make, in this case, I'll add what we call an advanced table. And maybe we're trying to learn all the amino acids. So here I'll just title this as my amino acids. And then for each one of them, maybe I want to know things like, in this case, it's actually suggesting some for me, chemical formula polarity. I probably also want to know the three-letter code, for example. And then for each row, you can add a given piece of knowledge that you're trying to understand. In this case, it's suggesting probably all the 20 amino acids for me. So I'll just go and add all those rows here. And then you can go and either fill out the three-letter code here automatically, or just let the AI do it for you. It should definitely get those all right. And then each of these cells you can then turn into a flashcard like this as well. And the reason that these tables are useful is that they generally will lead to well-structured flashcards. One of the failure modes with flashcards is letting yourself get used to matching the specific text on the card itself. For example, if I had a card like what is the three-letter code of glycine, and if I had another card which was like alanine three-letter code, then these are a little different. These cards both probably like they're fine individually, but because they're worded in a little different way, as you're practicing them a bunch, your mind might start to just attach itself to the structure of the card, if that makes sense, rather than the actual important piece of knowledge. So the tables and table flashcards are a useful way of just organizing those mentally so that every flashcard looks the same, and each of them will be prompted in your brain in the same way. And yeah, hopefully that made sense. And again, if that was at all confusing, I wouldn't stress it. Just stick with the core front double equals back side of the card, or in Anki, just making a simple front back card the same way. And that'll get you 90% of the benefits of using active recall, spaced repetition, and practicing like that. And then the final thing, which I wanted to go into here briefly, was just looking at the actual spaced repetition scheduler. So in RemNote, you can just go to settings and schedulers here. And we can see by default, we're using the same algorithm as in Anki. You don't actually need to go and worry about customizing this yourself at all or anything. I just think it's a somewhat useful visualization to look at here. And basically what this is saying is it's just showing you a preview for this algorithm of how the intervals might change based on the scores you report while you're practicing the cards. So for example, if we just said it was good if we remembered it successfully every time, then the intervals will start out small of 1 day, then they'll become 2 hours, 5 days, 11 days, and they'll just keep on expanding exponentially until we get up to nearly a year here. If we forget it sometimes, or if it's hard sometimes, that's totally fine. You can see in this trace, we initially found it easy, then we found it hard, then easy. And in the end, we still end up with this 1 year interval. So again, don't stress about it in a queue. Just trust the algorithm to take care of you as long as you're practicing consistently. If you find it super easy every time, then the intervals become super long pretty fast. Quickly jump into 5 years here. And then in this algorithm, if you press forgot, it'll partially go back to the initial schedule of a day and then a few days, but it will still have some internal model of the prior interactions you made here. So it's not fully resetting you or anything, but it is bringing you sort of back to the beginning so you can go and practice it and make sure that you fully understand it. And then there are a few different algorithms which you can use. Again, I really wouldn't overstress this at the beginning. Simply using any spaced repetition algorithm is the important thing in my opinion. But you can, of course, customize these in a variety of ways. Yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to show. If we have some extra time here, then I'd be more than happy to answer questions either about RemNote and spaced repetition. Mohammed from our team is also here, and he's sort of an MCAT expert if you guys have any questions about that. But again, main takeaway from today is try to use spaced repetition, and that'll really serve you well in the long term. Yep, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, would you like us to start the questions from the Q&A?
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, cool. The first question we have, this person's saying, or they're asking you, are flashcards the only way to use spaced repetition? And is spaced repetition the only way to truly memorize something?
Oh, interesting questions. Um, Flashcards are definitely not the only way to use spaced repetition. And I'd say honestly, the default state of the world right now is people don't use any flashcards and they still get some of the benefits of spaced repetition just by encountering things in their daily work or daily lives. Um, and I think the right way to think of spaced repetition is just as first of the forgetting curve as just a fundamental model or in some sense a fundamental truth about how human memory works. And then spaced repetition is just an algorithm which tries to take advantage of that forgetting curve to ensure you continue to remember a piece of knowledge while minimizing your total practice time. In general, I'd say it's worth putting in that time to go and do your cards each day to get that guarantee. Uh, and the benefit of flashcards is that it will independently schedule out each piece of knowledge. But of course, if you're doing any kind of active recall, you'll still get the benefits of that active recall. And you can try to construct your own spaced repetition schedule for yourself. For example, if you're doing a practice exam on, uh, you can space it out in that way for yourself. Or if you're just applying some knowledge every so often, you can try to space it out exponentially. You just won't get all the same benefits of having the individual schedule for each individual piece of knowledge as good as it could be. So you might lead to some forgetting that way. Um, and then, so the first part of the question was if spaced repetition must be with flashcards. The second part, sorry, can you remind me? Uh,
Yeah, from that same question,
yeah, please.
they were asking about is spaced repetition the only way to go about memorizing something completely?
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, I wish I could. I'm not sure I could bring up the chat myself here, but that's okay. So again, I'd say the spaced repetition sort of just and the forgetting curve is an unavoidable part of memory. And then if you don't practice something, you just unfortunately will forget it. And you, of course, can do active recall in a variety of ways, like I was mentioning. But personally, I still fundamentally find it somewhat counterintuitive. I think because it's very hard to notice yourself forgetting things. Often you won't even remember how well you understood something in the past. But whenever cognitive scientists have looked at this, either on things like those word lists or in much more practical situations, like there are studies that try to track people's performance throughout an entire semester of class or something, then they do find the forgetting curve and spaced repetition to be pretty universal. So I'd say it's universal, but you can go about it in a variety of ways, of which flashcards are a very good one. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin, for the insightful lecture. Just so the second question that we have is, can I use pencil with iPad on RemNote on RemNote? So like if they can use that function on their iPad or is it only on the laptop?
Yeah, so you can definitely use it with your Apple Pencil. Right now, you can use the Apple Pencil to write into these individual bullets, and the Apple Scribble feature will turn that into text for you. And then also in a few weeks, I can show this here. We're going to be releasing this new drawing feature, which will let you sort of draw either on PDFs or draw on your own notes and so on. That's going to be released in a few weeks as well. And in general, I'd say either typing your notes, handwriting them. Some people are very opinionated about that. And I think the important thing is just doing whatever works well for you and then going to the active recall part of it after. Yeah.
I think you might have just answered the second question, but they were asking, is RemNote equation friendly, like for example, for physics? And then you mentioned the occlusion for including pictures as well, but is there anything else?
Yeah, so for equations, so what would be something interesting? Uh, Trying to think of some interesting equation. Um, okay, maybe what is I don't know, interesting equation. Um, so if we do something like this, then maybe that's a bad one. I'll just show it here. So at any point, if you want to type math, then you can either type the slash symbol and then write out math, or you can just type the dollar sign twice, and then you can write with LaTeX here. And if you're familiar with LaTeX, then you could either write that out manually. So I can just go and write a fraction here, whatever I want, or I can just describe that in natural language. So let's say I want like the integral of x from 0 to 2, then I can just type that in natural language and the AI will automatically turn that into math for me. So the way I recommend doing this is, again, just like write out whatever your question is, and then type the double uh, dollar sign, and then write your equation in natural language, and then just use the AI to transform it, unless you're super familiar with the tech, and then that works as well. Yeah.
We could try to put Schrodinger's equation in there.
So I can even just maybe say, I'm not sure I'm going to spell this right. If I do this, I might, yeah. So I can just prompt that here and it will turn that into that for me. I don't know if that's right or not.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's exactly right. I just had to do it for PChem, so
And then again, you could turn this into a flashcard by saying for yourself, oh, I did spell it wrong, or maybe not. Schrödinger's equation, then the double equals, then put on the back of the card. Of course, this sort of thing you'd want to break down to have flashcards on what each of the symbols represent. Yeah.
Thank you. And our next question is, how does RemNote set itself apart from other study tools such as Quizlet, and what impact has it shown on students' learning, effectiveness, and confidence?
Yeah, great question. So again, please just use one of these tools. Of course, I think RemNote is the best, but as long as you're using active recall and spaced repetition, then that's what matters. So in RemNote, we just try to bring them all into one place. So we have the spaced repetition from Anki combined with the effective note taking that you'd get in Google Docs or in Notion or something like that. And then I'd say we're much more well targeted for serious learners than something like Quizlet is, for example, because we enable you to make flashcards directly in your notes and to break down ideas hierarchically using those nested bullets, like I was showing a moment ago, how, for example, for Schrodinger's equation, we'd want to not only have the equation itself here, but then also have a bunch of nested information about it, what this actually means from a physical interpretation, and various nested flashcards underneath there. And then we also try to make it easy for you to connect your notes to your PDFs and other resources in the way that I was saying. And all of you, almost all these features I'm showing here are free, like all the flashcard stuff is free. But for some of the AI features and uploading files and stuff, we have a link for you guys to get free access to that as well with the remnote.com/PreMedCC link. And in terms of impact, so we have over 1 million students using the tool, and basically every day. Honestly, what motivates me is people telling me how RemNote has really helped them either turn their studying around or help them get higher grades. We personally have not run any sort of direct scientific studies on top of RemNote. I want to be totally transparent about that. But in the same way that Anki and Quizlet and these other tools are built on top of the cognitive science principles that I mentioned of spaced repetition, active recall, we just try to bake all those in and make them easy for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say that what Mr. Schneider said, that in terms of you pick one of them and master that system. The only thing is I know with Quizlets, and I used to use it quite often, is you're very limited to what to what you can do from your PDF or from your lectures or from your slides or from your notes. And so you have to like manually enter each of them. The other part of it too is that I found is, and I know one thing I know a lot of people like Quizlet is people have already made their cards and it's already in the system, which is great. But there's two problems with that. First, you don't know the person who's done it has done it correctly or accurately. And so if there's any errors in that, you're putting your faith into someone that you don't know and you don't know if they did it correctly. And the second part of it is the whole part of learning is to actually enter that stuff yourself, either by typing or and I'm kind of excited that Martin said that the new thing's going to be released in a couple of weeks with handwriting. So whatever works for you, I think that's like the big takeaway of this thing is that we all could go find Quizlets, but I've done it myself where I went and looked for it and it was wrong, and so and luckily it was on a subject that I knew beforehand. So yeah, I'm putting that link right now in the chat. But it's also on the event page that you signed up. That's already posted as well.
Thank you guys. We have one more question in the chat. Oh, we have another one now, but this question is this person uses ChatGPT to create a CSV file to upload into Anki. Can RemNote do this as well, or is it only take notes as the database source?
Yeah, so you should be able to upload the CSV file just by like selecting and then pasting into one of these tables here. That might be a little tricky to do. I'll give you guys my email. Feel free to just message me if you run into issues with that. But yeah, you should be able to pop that into here too. Yeah. And if the CSV is an export from Anki, I'm not sure if that's what you meant. You can also import the Anki deck, but it'll work either as an Anki import or just a CSV if you paste into the table itself.
Thank you. The next question we have is those suggested AI generated explanations or suggested cards, where does it get that data from? Any chance of AI hallucination, or do you all double check these inputs?
Yeah, so with the AI cards, there's basically two kinds of those in RemNote. So with the ones which are just on the flashcards itself, which like the ones from today, like if I just make one again quickly, then let me share this table. So these are just AI generated. So you of course need to be careful about hallucinations, but in practice, I wouldn't say that we've seen that to be a significant issue. Behind the scenes, we have a bunch of evals, they're called, just like the evaluation system here, and it performs well on those. But of course, we haven't manually checked all these explanations just because they're all customized to your own specific flashcard. So in practice, I don't think it's a big issue, especially if you're within some well-understood domain of knowledge, such as anything on the MCAT or Step 1. But if you're going off to something more obscure, then maybe that's an issue. In that case, adding a PDF is helpful here because then it can make sure that the content is pulled from the PDF to ground that more effectively. We also do have a sort of more MCAT specific product in RemNote, which is sort of separate from what I've been talking about today, which has more like pre-built flashcards and pre-built explanations and such. And those have all been manually checked. But the explanations for cards which you generate or write yourself are basically AI ones.
Thank you. We have one more question in the chat. They're
Can you
asking,
show the MCAT slides if you could pull those up?
Yeah, for sure. So the MCAT product here is, again, pretty separate, pretty different from what we were talking about. It's integrated into RemNote, but it's instead a bunch of pre-built resources for which you can study with the MCAT. The reason we built this was we were talking to a bunch of pre-meds like you guys who were struggling to prepare for the MCAT because there was too much burden to go through all the content yourself, had to figure out all your own scheduling, how to make all the flashcards yourself, that sort of thing. So we've just tried to bring it all together here. So on our course content page, we've gone through and organized out all the different kind of topics which you need to know. And then for each of these lessons, we have the corresponding Khan Academy video, which are still pretty good. I think that they're a great resource for the MCAT, as well as linked OpenStax and Kaplan review books. And if you just go through these here for each lesson, then we have it sort of set up with this active learning experience where it will, as you watch the video, it'll ask you questions about the video to try to help make sure you're understanding it. Then we have pre-built flashcards for each of these lectures for the MCAT content, and pre-built quizzes and a little QBank thing as well. This is much more MCAT specific, but these are all just sort of like an extension, I'd say, of the principles which we talked about earlier, just like helping you to use active recall, use spaced repetition, use these practice questions with all just pre-built content.
From the chat, I think that's the rest of the questions.
You could ask that one.
Okay. Just making sure. Could you please explain the advantages of using fill in the blanks, basic flashcards, or image occlusion when studying?
Honestly, I'd say it's more of a personal preference thing. And I see people represent the same kind of knowledge with either of the different flashcards. For example, again, with mitochondria, I can either have it be a forward backward card here, or I can have that sentence on the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell, or if I want to do the meme, or whatever kind of sentence I want, and just make it fill in the blank like this. They really represent the same thing. They're kind of testing you on the same information. Personally, I like to think of this as what triggers the card brings to mind in your head when you see the front of it, um, to the piece of knowledge that's on the back. In this specific case, I guess they're sort of testing inverse direction. One is testing you to go from mitochondria to the definition. The other is going from the definition to mitochondria. You can also do that with a forward backward card by just setting it to go in both directions here. But between these is just sort of personal preference, whatever is faster for you. And then for the image occlusion cards, I do say that that's something of a different kind of thinking about the knowledge. Many things which are visible, visual, physical, you sort of just need to have some image representing them, and that'll help you get that information in your head. But I would just choose between one of these formats and probably mostly stick with it. Don't overthink it. And then when you have something that's visual or physical, then go ahead and add that image occlusion card as well. Yeah.
Another question just popped up into the chat. They're asking, I use image occlusion for anatomy and anything where I'll need to identify or remember location or signal transduction processes. Oh, I guess it's not really saying a question actually.
Yeah, but that's a great use case for when to use it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Mr.
anything else?
Schneider, are there any other cool features down the line coming out that you could share with us?
Sure. So
Okay, do you have a service that you could take our exams for us? Just kidding. That's a joke.
Um, yeah, so two main things coming out down the line are the drawing feature, which I mentioned, which will let you either draw on PDFs, as I was showing here, or let you draw on image inclusion cards as well. So, for example, if I got this image and I wanted to edit, crop it, draw on it in some way, we'll let you draw on that there, as well as draw into your notes and make flashcards from your handwritten notes. Um, Another thing we've been building out is the ability to record your lectures, again, so that you can try to really stay as present as possible during the lecture, where you don't need to worry about taking those verbatim notes or worry about missing some idea, but instead it'll record it for you, and then you will have that transcription available afterwards. Actually, maybe I can just let that run here. I'm not sure. Okay. Oh, it's not going to work because it's Zoom is capturing the microphone, I think. But anyway, it'll let you record the lecture and make flashcards from it so that you can focus on really understanding what the lecturer is saying. Um, but again, our goal really is just to make learning easier. So I'll give you guys my email if any of you in the call want to chat with me after. I'd love to hear about what the most frustrating, annoying points of learning are for you. Yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else have any other questions? Um, Wait a second, but I'm sure um, Martin has other plans on a Saturday besides. Um, oh, that's a question. That's a great question. Do you want to ask that,
Yeah,
Steve?
is RemNote available as an app? Does it differ from Chrome or Safari app?
Yeah, so you can use it wherever. You can either use it in your browser. Today I was just using this demo URL, which maybe looks weird, but you can just go to remnote.com and access it there. And all the same features, of course, or you can download it both to your computer, in this case on a Mac or anywhere, as well as for Android and iOS, and iPhone and iPad. And we just try to make it available everywhere with the same features.
I would just say if you have it on your phone instead of doom scrolling on socials, uh, you could review um, flashcards. Hint, hint.
Yeah, I mean, that is a big part of our goal. Honestly, I still often doom scroll. So if you guys have any ideas of how we can improve that, but making it really easy to do your space repetition is our goal.
Um, how long is the link good for? Um, whenever whenever Mr. Schneider wants to cut it off.
I don't think we're gonna cut it off, honestly. You guys should just use that.
It's up to him. I have no power in that part. Hey, Mohammed, do you want to just come and say a couple of words before we go off? Talk
Sure, sorry
all
about that. Couldn't
talk about how
yeah.
fun clinical rotations are in
Yeah, so
medical
I'm
school.
actually currently at the hospital on my neurology rotation. I completed surgery last month. It's been fun getting experience in the hospital. And yeah, I think for whatever Martin said is true. Medical school is a lot more different than undergrad, and I think it rewards people who have built systems to go through the large amounts of information that we're given, and you're expected to know a lot in a short amount of time. So, like I was answering questions in the chat before, coming in with a game plan on the first day is the best thing you can do for yourself. And I personally found that knowing how to use RemNote, knowing how to use space repetition software put me well ahead of my peers. So if you're early on in your pre-med journey, if you're going to take the MCAT soon, I think um, it would be worthwhile to learn how to use these tools, especially RemNote, Anki, these types of tools, because you will use them. And I know there are students, other classmates that don't use these tools, which is okay. Everyone has their own learning style, but it makes it a lot easier for you to get through this content, review it very quickly, and pull the knowledge from your memory when you need it the most. So right now, I can attest to that as a third year. A lot of the information I was learning in my first and second year, I've been trying to keep up with in terms of my cards and my practice questions. And it seems like it may not be that helpful, but it really shows when you understand what's going on in front of you. So if there's, and now there are real patients in front of me, so I can actually use that information in a clinical context, and it matters at this point. So um, take a little bit of time, try to understand the space repetition process. It will pay dividends at the end, I promise. It does take more time, and it is difficult. Like Martin said, it is a workout. It should feel like a workout. a lot of the times, especially when I was studying for my boards, I was doing 800 cards a day. And, along with questions. But that's kind of what you're signing up for. And if you go in with that expectation, you shouldn't be surprised that, there's a lot of work ahead of you, but these tools make it easier for you. I used RemNote extensively in undergrad. I was a physiology major, and that really made it easier for me. I could take notes very quickly, make those cards right there and then in my class, and I could use that whole document to review very quickly as well. So, um, whatever you do, try to find a system that works for you. I know this is a meeting for RemNote, but even if you don't use the flashcard feature, it still helps you consolidate all that information that you're going to get from your lectures and put it into one place. And having that ability to work through lots of information and um, create that system that works for you would be beneficial in the long run, especially as a medical student, as a resident, and just going through this journey and becoming a physician. But if anyone else has other questions, I could ask those. Um, how do you prevent yourself from burnout in medical school? So this is tough. Everyone has their own way of burnout. So I think uh, what I've found with spaced repetition, it gives you more time to do other things. That's what I found. Um, Early on, it may seem like you're spending more time with cards and spaced repetition, but in the long run, you'll be studying a lot less compared to your peers. I would ask my classmates, how long did you study for? Some people are studying for 10, 15 hours or whatever, right? And for me, I would be spending 2 or 3 hours and I would be learning the same thing as them, understanding it at the same or even better level than them because the system itself, you have to trust the spaced repetition. I know like sometimes when you click good and it sends your card like 2 weeks into the future, you have to trust the algorithm. And you'll be surprised by how much you remember if you keep up with your cards every day. And over time, that load decreases. So it's not like you're going to be doing, hundreds of cards every single day. The more you use it throughout the future, you'll have a couple of hundred cards, and at that point, you'll be able to do these in, you could do like 200 cards in 30 minutes. That's how quick you'll become at it. So in terms of burnout, try to, keep up with your hobbies. I know it's difficult, but I think the best thing is trying to find a system that's efficient. So you're spending the minimum amount of studying and using the rest to relax and catch up with your family and do those types of things. I think when people have burnout, they're struggling with finding a good study system. So they're jumping between different study techniques and different resources, and they're wasting a lot of their time. But in the first couple of months, that will take a little bit of getting used to, and that's something you have to figure out for yourself. Ask your friends, ask your classmates what resources they're using. But for me, that's like the number one thing I can recommend, trying to find something that's efficient, that works for you, and that's quick. Once you're able to do that, everything will fall into place. You'll have a lot more free time. And I personally found, I think I had more free time in my pre-clerkship. I had a lot of free time because I came in this understanding that if I learned the content well the first time and use the spaced repetition um, science, right? This is a science, then I can trust it. And I've trusted it. It's been 3 years. Something might be working if it's been 3 years. I'm still here, but um, yeah, that would be my recommendation. Um, I've okay, Angelina.
I don't want to get too biblical, but in the Bible, that says, physician heal thyself. And actually the correct term is knowing yourself. And how you avoid burnout is knowing yourself and what brings you
Mhm.
pleasure, decompress, and those are the things that nobody can tell you what to do. I mean, I have a really good friend of mine who's a surgeon, and she crochets, and it's kind of like the most, but it soothes her and says that whenever she's burned out or tired, she just sits down and crochets for a couple, for an hour or so, and that calms her down.
Hmm.
Some people work out, some people go on a run. So whatever it is, like, knowing yourself,
Definitely.
that's how you heal yourself. And so the correct
Definitely.
translation was,
That's great. So someone's asking advice on studying for anatomy physiology. So for me, I personally was a physiology major. I was fortunate enough to actually dissect cadavers in my third and fourth year. So I had a very good understanding of anatomy. So if you're able to, if your university offers a cadaver lab or an advanced anatomy lab, that would be my recommendation. That would be the on top of my list, because anatomy hits everyone um, like a truck. It's a lot, and a lot of people feel like it's impossible. Um, and a lot of schools give all of anatomy at once, and it's very overwhelming. You don't really know how to study for it. There's a practical portion. There's an identification portion, like the lab portion. So for the practical portion, try to find cadaver images online or pre-made decks. Use image occlusion for that because you will be identifying those in lab themselves. You'll be identifying different muscles, ligaments, those types of things on the cadaver itself. So you want to be comfortable with looking at cadavers. And physiology, that's something you'll learn in med school. You don't really have to worry about it. If anything, you would want to brush up on your biochemistry, because that's one of the first courses you take in med school. A lot of people don't do that well on that. And that's also a big part of your board exam, your first board exam anyway. So having a good understanding, and I truly mean understanding and not just memorization. I know like with cards and flashcards, you can fall in the habit of just memorizing the card, but like I answered in a previous question, if you learn something really well, the mechanism, the pathophysiology prior to actually committing it to memory, that's the best thing you can do for yourself. Because you're not really, when you're in clinic or remembering something, you're not remembering the card itself, you're remembering the underlying detail and the pathology in order to come up with that answer. And that's what separates physicians from other healthcare providers. We have a deeper understanding of the pathology, the pathophysiology in the background that we can make those connections, right? So that's that. Angelina's asking, no, it's not true. There's definitely a social life. I think it's institution dependent. My class was very collaborative. We would always have events going on and stuff. So again, it's more about figuring out what works for you, creating a schedule, sticking to it, maybe figuring out like, after 5 p.m. I'm going to stop studying. I'm not going to study for 10 hours every day. But when you need to put in the time, you put in the time, but when you need to be off, actually be off. Um, it could be difficult, but I would say it's a myth. There is definitely a social life, if you want
yeah,
to have one. Yeah.
that is a myth. I mean, I know a couple of friends that gone to med school, and they say med school was a great time because it was the first time in their life they never had a job, and they were only going to school, and it was a lot of fun. And I know a lot of med students, like, and I think it also comes to, like, if you know how to, like, decompress and find joy in things. But if you're one of those pre-meds, and I know I'm going to upset a lot of people, if you're not happy where you are as a pre-med, you're probably not going to be happy as a med student. And that's just, you know, finding joy in everywhere you are at that moment is really important. So,
Yeah.
because, med school, I mean, pre-med is easy compared to, med school, and, med school is easy compared to residency. So I think it gets harder as it goes.
Yeah, so I'm gonna answer two more questions and I'm going to head out. Just have to go back to my resident. So Angelina's asking how many hours a day do you first thing? Again, this is very student dependent. I think like the number one thing I can recommend is don't compare yourself to your classmates. Um, I know it's hard, but every single person in your class is a type A person. If they weren't, they wouldn't be there. And it can be hard, it can be disheartening, trying to compare yourself, like, you figure out that, oh, this person only studied 2 hours, but they got 99th percentile. How's that? And I studied 10 hours and I didn't even get 50th percentile. You know, some people, have to work harder. Some people have to not work as hard, right? So that's just the reality. But on average, it really depends. Like some courses are more difficult than others. I would say like your first year, actually your first semester, you're going to be studying like nonstop because you're still trying to get into the groove. Anatomy, you're going to be on campus a lot, but once you get into your systems courses, the hours go down a little bit. You've found you're in your groove. You understand how you learn, and you kind of know what to expect at that point. So everything comes with time. And then last question, how do you earn money or pay bills? So mostly everyone, typically in the United States, most students take out loans. So we have medical student loans that pay for um, our tuition and our living costs. And some people are non-traditional, so they worked for a couple of years before starting med school. So they have savings that they use for paying bills and living costs, but for the most part, everyone has loans, so um, that's pretty much it. But but yeah, I mean, what I'm going to part with is this is a tough journey. I don't want to sugarcoat it, but if you know what you're getting yourself into and don't have um, unrealistic expectations, you shouldn't be surprised about what's coming ahead, if that makes sense. Um, and hard work will take you anywhere, especially in medicine. Everyone's a hard worker, and everyone is sacrificing a lot to be here. But at the end of the day, you're here for your patients, you're here for patient care. And if that's something that you truly do care about, a lot of this will feel natural to you. It won't feel like a burden. And that's why as pre-meds, we're required to have clinical experience because you don't want to find out in third year that you don't like talking to patients or you can't handle, XYZ regarding the patient care because at that point you're too deep um, into this journey that it's hard to back out at that point. But, you know, really focus on your clinical experience and really question whether this field is for you. It's difficult to get through if it's not something you're passionate about, but if you're passionate about it, it's very easy to get through, relatively, right? Um, but uh, but I appreciate PreMedCC for having me on. And I can put my email in the chat. I am a little busy, but I'll try to get back to you guys if you do have any questions. I know like it's hard to get reliable information regarding this journey. So I like to make myself available to future doctors. So feel free to save that. But yeah, thanks, Ruben. Thanks, Martin, Steve, and Marco. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Nice meeting you.
We have a couple more questions about.
I could start off, yeah. One person is asking, can you download large Anki files in RemNote?
Yeah. So with the importer, if you just click on your name in the top left here and you press import, then that'll bring it in. It'll be as a table here. If it's above some threshold in terms of size, it might ask you to break it down, or rather like check off which subsets of it you want to import, but they should be able to bring in community revenue. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question we have, um, are any available training videos or other materials to get us up to speed on how to use RemNote?
For sure. So in the bottom right, there's this question mark here with a variety of resources. If you want videos specifically, then if you just click on video tutorials here, then there's a variety of quick starts and guides, But in general, I would say I wouldn't overcomplicate it. Another trap is sort of over optimizing your system rather than getting into the learning. I would just start using it in some class, especially right now it's the beginning of the semester, and then maybe watch videos whenever you feel you're confused about something or if you want to level that up further. Yeah.
Then we have one more. They're asking which of the three spaced repetition setting defaults on RemNote is the best in your opinion?
Um, I mean, we've tried to leave the actual current default as the one we think is best, which is we have left the default as Anki SM2 right now. Um, there is pretty good evidence, I'd say, that FSRS v6 has leads to somewhat lower total time studying. You can sort of measure the efficiency of the algorithm in terms of how many interactions it has you do to get to a certain retrieval amount. It is a much newer algorithm though, and I'd say that maybe some of the evidence is not built up quite as much. So honestly, I'd say either Anki or FSR v6 are great choices. I wouldn't use the legacy exponential one at this point. If you want to be more on the cutting edge, use the FSR v1, and both of them should be plenty good. Yeah.
All righty. Well, I think we got every question answered besides the medical school ones, which I don't think Martin can answer those. But thank you again, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Mr. Schneider, for making time again to come on a Saturday away from all the other busy things that you're involved in. Uh, and yeah, thank you for doing a walkthrough. Now, I just hope you could go take all my exams for me then.
No. Thank you guys so much for having me. Yeah.